Hey, what's up, man?
Hey Matt, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, I'm good.
I appreciate you taking the time to do this. It looks very sunny wherever it is that you are. That looks awesome.
Oh, you know what? Like for the first time in my life, I've got windows and I'm not used to it being a creature of the sun, but it's quite nice.
Well, I've got a lot of questions to ask, a lot of stuff to talk about. I want to start by just asking, as a guy who obviously live music, performing live is incredibly important to you. That's kind of where you feel at home. What has the last year been like for you? Because the last show that you played was like a year ago in Michigan.
In Michigan. Yeah, man, it's been tough. I really feel like I was put on this earth to play shows. It's my reason for being, and it's definitely been a tough adjustment period. You know, I don't think there's ever quite the same adrenaline hit of playing a show as you can get from like watching Netflix in your sweatpants. But you know, it's tough. But you know, we're all in the same boat, so I can't complain, and at least I'm happy and healthy. That's all that matters, you know.
So, since you haven't been able to play shows, how have you spent the last year? I mean, I assume because you just released the EP, I imagine that a lot of like 2020 was spent writing, recording, working on that.
Oh yeah, I've become like a total studio rat, and I feel like everybody who's always on tour all the time, all you think is like, man, I can't wait to get off the road. If I just had a few weeks at home, I would make all this music, I would do this, I would do that. And now it's time to really put your money where your mouth is. You got a whole year off. So you get that space to create as much as you want without having to rush to sound check or play the show or anything like that. So it's been an amazing transformation into a different part of my brain, to say the least.
With how different the last year has been for you without playing shows and now becoming, like you said, a studio rat, how do you think the last year has changed you as an artist, and how will it affect sort of Des Rocs moving forward? Because sooner or later, I mean, I know you tweeted it out the other day, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. This is going to end. You're going to be able to play shows again. What do you think you've sort of learned in the last year, and how will that affect you and your music going forward?
Well, I've always been really grateful to be able to play shows. Like my whole life's journey, the whole trajectory of everything has been like, man, when I'm on that stage, I'm so grateful for every minute I have. And now I think that same sentiment is going to be like maxed out times like 1,000%. Man, you can never take it for granted ever again, you know? So that has definitely changed a bit. I'm nervous though, like when things open back up, am I just going to play like 1,000 shows in a row and just like kill myself and run myself into the ground? Probably, but you know, that'll be a good problem to have.
I mean, I know you've already played like 3 shows in one day at Lollapalooza, so I think you could manage like 1,000 shows. I think you'd be fine.
Yeah, man, that was crazy because like let's just say I'm not exactly of like the stature of Guns N' Roses where you have like a whole crew who's like doing all this stuff for you. So like we were like lugging our gear around in the heat in Grand Park. Like, oh man, that was nuts. Like just 3 shows in one day. That was by the last song of the last set, I was like delirious. Yeah.
So we talked about the EP. It's out now. How different was it writing music during the pandemic? I'm sure that as you write a song, you probably think, how is this going to play live? What is this going to sound like live? So you have all these songs that you haven't had the chance to play live just yet, outside of maybe, YouTube stuff or whatever. How different was it writing music during the pandemic?
So the process is pretty much the same. I'm always thinking about live, even if I have never played a show before. Like when I was writing music and I first started, like I was thinking about playing music to arenas and stadiums and things like that, but I'm just strumming like a little guitar in my basement. You know what I mean? Like I've always, that's what fuels my writing. And like when I'm working out a section, I'm just thinking like, what would come next on a stage? So the process actually hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is that I have a lot more time to sit with the music and reflect and evaluate it and tweak it.
Once you think you play those songs for the first time, do you think you'll also make adjustments based on how it feels live? Maybe it doesn't take off the way you think it will, or the crowd doesn't react, the audience doesn't react the way you expect them to?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm always changing recorded versions of songs for live. So like a lot of the records, it's not exactly the same. I'll kind of rearrange some bits and parts and stuff just so it could feel different. And like, yeah, just night after night, you feel it. You feel what reacts, what feels good to you. It feels good to an audience, and you're always refining it. Yeah, usually.
I know you released an acoustic performance of This Is Our Life not too long ago, and you described it as both the best feeling in the world and the biggest damn tease of all time. And having watched that performance, I can tell the amount of energy that you have like pent up, ready to explode in that performance is, I imagine the first shows you're going to play are going to be insane because you just have all of this energy ready to get out.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of always in my thing. And again, I think it's like now times 10. You know, whenever I have a show, I'm just like waiting all day to play the show. And I remember like I'm just ready to go. I like even like being like a young kid in New York and like playing shows. Like the second that band before me, I'm like waiting off stage holding my pedal board. And like the second they hit their last note, I'm like running on stage and like my stage is my turn now to go. I remember like reading a review of like one of my old high school bands. We were playing the Bowery Ballroom. We were opening for this like super cool guy, like R&B, like Mr. Slick kind of thing. And like the review of the show was something like, it seems like the opener as if they were in a cage their entire lives and were just let out for the first time on Bowery Ballroom stage, like something like that. And like, that's always stuck with me, man. I think it again goes to being like grateful to be able to play shows, you know?
So do you try and sort of recapture that just getting out of the cage energy? Like you said, that's something you always remember, something you always point to. Do you think about that? Like right when you go on stage, you're like, all right, I'm out of my cage. I've got 30 minutes. I've got an hour to just go crazy. I can do whatever I want.
Yeah, it just comes naturally to me, man. It's I don't even have to think about it. You know, it's like I always say like on stage is the real me and this here is the show. You know what I mean? Like it's like when I get to like be my truest self. That's why it feels so good for me. Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward, as I'm sure a lot of people are, to be able to see you back on stage, hopefully really soon. As I prepared to talk to you, I sat down, I listened to, I think, everything that you sort of have released to this point. I spent a lot of time last night listening to everything. And I tried to kind of pinpoint what like the Des Rocs sound was, because I read all these articles, read all these interviews you do, and everybody has a different label, a different description. I've seen, somebody called it classic new rock and whatever. So how would you describe Des Rocs for somebody maybe that's never heard it before? They're going to go to a show for the first time. You're opening for somebody. Maybe it's a headline gig that somebody's going to go check out. How would you describe Des Rocs? Because I mean, for me, it's straight up rock and roll. It's pretty simple, big umbrella. It can be basically everything, but you are rock and roll personified.
Thank you, man. Man, how do I describe it? It's really tough. Maybe bedroom arena rock for everyone, for all people, everywhere. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I think of it, man. It's like a 2021 approach to classic elements, but totally updated and fresh. And there might be all these different sounds. I might throw in like a Mexican pan flute into a record, but at the end of the day, it's all me. It's all my energy. It's all my vibe. It's my soul, regardless of the production choices. And it's always just filled with this kind of intangible energy. Like that's Des Rocs to me. Yeah.
I think the thing that stood out the most to me is that your sound is incredibly fresh. As a dude who has to listen to, a lot of different bands all the time, a lot of it sounds very, very similar. A lot of bands are doing sort of the same thing. Every once in a while, you'll get a band that is doing something different or something you haven't heard in a while. But everything that I listen to from you has a sound that is reminiscent of things, but also very, very, very unique. You've created something that, I mean, nobody really has done before with all the different influences you have. You're bringing it all together.
Thank you, man. The U word is everything for me. Like, you could be like, man, I hate your music. I think it stinks, but it's so unique. And I would say, thank you so much. I really appreciate that, man. Cause like, I just feel like there are so many things that sound the same. And if there was a version of me that sounded just like me out there, then I wouldn't make the music I make, because I think art needs to take a big swing, and either you're going to knock it out of the park or you're going to fall on your butt. And like, I say that all the time, but it's better than just a base hit. Anything in the middle, we got plenty of that. There's no room for that.
I think about, we talked about, how you would label what it is that you do, how you would label your sound. And I talk to people and I wonder if labels and genres and any of that stuff really matters anymore, because the lines have blurred so much. I mean, every pop song has a rapper on it. Rock songs now have rappers on them. You have some people adding R&B, or maybe country has rap influences in it. It's interesting because people always want to have a label on something. If it has a guitar, it has to be a rock song. It has to be heavy metal. And that's not how it is anymore. Times have changed where you can be a guy who puts out a quote rock song that has a pan flute in it or has an R&B groove to it. I mean, it's possible for you to be a whole bunch of different things now.
Absolutely, man. I just think it's about identity and energy. It's like I just identify as a rock artist, but man, like my songs are going to really blur those boundaries and transcend any sort of box. People, when it comes to like every genre, it's only rock that people like, you got to have this production choice. You got to have this length of a song where there's rules. And it's weird to me because rock is all about rule breaking and there are no rules. So I feel like that really guides every decision I make as a musician.
I saw in a few different things written about you, it stated that you were going to resuscitate rock and roll. You were going to save rock and roll. What do you think happened that rock needs saving in the first place? I mean, it's always been out there. There have always been rock bands, quote unquote, but you're here, according to these different articles, you're here to save the day, so to speak. So what is rock? Why does rock and roll need saving?
Well, importantly, I just want to say those are not my words.
I know.
If someone says that, I don't have any sort of mission to revive anything or bring anything back. And I think that is kind of a fool's errand because all you'll get is a great imitation of something that's already existed. My mission is to push and to take risks because that's what defined those early artists that people now think of as classic, which is so crazy to me. They go, classic rock. It's got to be Jimi Hendrix, Led Zeppelin, this, that. These are like the most avant-garde, cutting-edge artists of the time that blew people's minds with how weird they were getting. So I don't distill their sound as what is classic and needs coming back. I distill that it's their ethos and their artistic push that needs coming back.
And I think you most certainly do that, whether it's the sound or the visuals. Watching some of the videos you have, the video for This Is Our Life is certainly something that maybe you don't see very often. It's awesome to see somebody taking those chances and doing things a little bit different than what people have been doing now for the past 10, 20 years, because it's been a really long time since somebody came in Nirvana and shook things up and went, okay, let's go. Hair bands were a thing for a minute, but now this one band has changed the world.
Yeah, man, it's crazy because it's like it's a blessing and a curse. In a sense, it's easier to get started and get heard when you belong into a scene and fit nicely into a box. You know what I mean? But when you don't, it could be a little bit more difficult to like get that first step. Like when you tell somebody, I want to make a video for this song, and in the opening scene, I'm going to have a woman who's just exactly like me, but isn't me, stab a man who's also just like me in the eye through a pizza box with a scalpel. Like, it's not exactly your average rock and roll music video where there's like a band playing in a warehouse. So it's a little tougher to get those yeses from people. But once you get them and you get it out there, I think you can do so much more.
We're going to talk about pizza in a minute because just spending time on your Twitter, obviously pizza is a big thing. So we'll discuss pizza here in a minute. But I want to talk about, you talk about your influences, you talk about Hendrix and Zeppelin and all that. So what is it like when you get the call that you're going to open a show for the Stones?
Oh, it's thrilling, man. Just thinking about it now makes me smile. It's it's like, you can't even believe it really happened. You're like, was that a dream or was that real? And you're like, no, that was real. Yeah, especially just like being indie and new and doing something that everybody just kind of like said no to up until like a couple of weeks ago. You know what I mean? It's weird for someone to just kind of like be like, yeah, to get that kind of endorsement was just really like fascinating and so cool. Yeah.
And I think it's a good indication of sort of what you created for yourself, because you've opened for the Stones and then you've opened for Muse, two vastly different, but also two major, huge bands around the world. And then you did a tour with Grandson. I mean, they're all three bands that really aren't all that much alike. And yet you were able to fit in and open for all three of them and do a great job of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's definitely nobody who's toured with Muse and the Stones. You know what I mean? I think it just shows you what I believe in my core is that the music I'm making is meant for the world. And it doesn't matter what language you speak, that you can sing along and that you can lose yourself in it and have a profoundly emotional experience to it. It's not niche music. It's not club music. I'm pretty delusional with my goals and ambitions for my career. And yeah, man, I think that's a special thing. I still can't believe that stuff is real.
So when you talk about those delusional goals, then like what's the, like if you have your list of here's the 5 things I want to do, what's like the top of the list?
The top of the list is the headline football arenas. I mean, football stadiums and arenas. Yeah, that's without a doubt like the top of the list. That's really the only goal, to be honest.
When you see, can you wrap your head around, I mean, opening for the Stones, I guess you can wrap your head around, but you think about like Foo Fighters playing Wembley and the amount of people that they're able to pack into some of these places, and having like your band play in front of that many people at a show like that, it's got to be something that's mind blowing to even have that thought that at some point it could happen.
Yeah, I think about it all day and all night since I was in kindergarten. That's all I think about.
Since you had the chance to open for the Stones, you have these massive goals. You get to pick one more band to open up for. You've done the Stones and Muse. What's like, again, list. People love lists. What's the one band? If you could pick any band to open up a show for, who would it be?
Oh, man. Dead or alive?
Sure. Dead or alive. Yeah.
I would want to play with Elvis Presley, without a doubt.
Oh, of course. I mean, yeah. That would be, and not like Elvis towards the end of his career, correct? Like Elvis Hound Dog days, or just Elvis anytime.
Elvis, 70s Elvis. I want to play in like some seedy Vegas showroom kind of thing, and everyone's smoking and there's cocktail waitresses, and he has like 100-piece orchestra on stage and a choir, and I'm opening that show. That's the show I open. That would be
amazing.
Yeah.
This Is Our Life. The EP is out right now. The lead single is This Is Our Life. The song, I listening to it, sounds like sort of a song maybe written, I guess it could have been written outside of the pandemic, but it has kind of a pandemic vibe to it. Is that true?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Written in and released in peak pandemic. And yeah, man, that song just goes back to everything we were talking about earlier about like just wanting to be let out of the cage and scream something. And yeah, that song, that means a lot to me personally. And then it kind of took on a lot of new meaning with everything pandemic related.
I know you've done, the EP thing. You've released singles here and there. I know that a lot of artists are doing that now, as opposed to putting out like a full album, just because that's how people consume music now. There are guys like me who still want to listen to full albums, but there's a lot of people who I want to listen to this one song that I like, and I want to listen to it a bunch. Mm-hmm. Is there a plan now that you're with 300, is there a plan to put out a full length Des Rocs album at some point?
Yeah, I'm working on it right now.
Fantastic. What's it like being, I mean, you talked about being an indie artist opening for the Stones. What's it like now to not be so indie anymore?
Well, I'm still on an indie label. I'm just a little less indie.
Okay. All right. Okay.
But you know what? Nothing changes, man. It's still the same kind of hustle and drive that I had when I was a little kid in 30 minutes east of here in Long Island. It's just I wake up every day solely possessed by a vision I have of a show that is 30 years from now in my head, and I'm like fat as hell, and it's that kind of Elvis show, and it's thrilling, and it's beautiful, and it's musical, and it's trippy, and every thought I have, even when I'm buying a burrito at the corner bodega, is like, how do I get to that? And then every action I take is, how do I get to that?
If you do get to that point 30 years down the road, are you going to do like the Vegas Residency where like Des Rocs has his own theater that he's performing? Are you going like old Vegas where you're just playing the Nugget like every night? What is the plan?
Oh, I mean, absolutely, man. It's like, you're going to have your couple good years where you're doing football stadiums, and you'll have Des Rocs on ice. Then you'll work your way to the Vegas show, the Residency, of course.
You've got to get some puppets involved somehow. There's got to be a cartoon. Des Rocs and Scooby Doo go to the island of mystery.
Absolutely, man. It's going to 30 years from now. Let's touch base again, like the 2050s, and be a wild ride. Let's call this conversation.
I'll make sure to save this so we can point back to this and go, hey, remember when? Here's me and Scooby Doo.
Yeah, please. I'll say, told you. Yeah. Messing around.
Along with everything, I mean, spending time listening to your music, the past couple of days and getting ready for this, I mentioned, I did some scrolling through the Twitter machine, which you seem to spend a lot of time in as well. There's 2 things I want to ask you about. One, the word filthy in general. You've got Filthy Fridays. You've got Filthy Animals. Why is everything so filthy with Des Rocs?
Man, I just, like a couple years ago, started calling people filthy animals for fun, and people really embraced it. And this moniker of Filthy Animals took on a life of its own and has now become like the go-to name for anybody who is a fan of my music and wants to be a part of what we're doing.
It's pretty cool. It's got to be pretty cool to see as this thing is getting off the ground and things are starting to, pick up steam. And then you see like fan accounts that are like Filthy Animals Twitter accounts that, are just tweeting out your stuff all the time.
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool. It's pretty surreal. And like, we have a really close and special relationship.
The other thing that I noticed on Twitter as I scrolled through is a lot of pizza references. You mentioned, somebody getting stabbed in the eye, stabbed through a pizza box in the music video. Just the other day, you tweeted if somebody ever came out with pizza seltzer, that would be a game changer, something to that effect. I believe I think you said you claimed to invent pizza butter at one point.
Sometimes I forget that the Twitter is like public, and then people say, how do you know I said that? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have, I'm a single, I'm a dude that lives with his girlfriend who works nights as a nurse. I don't have a lot of other, hobbies. So I just scroll, man. That's all I do all day long. So I'm like, oh, let's see what Des is doing. Pizza.
Twitter for me is just kind of like a stream of conscious platform. And in a sense, that's great because it gives you the most insight into the inner workings of my mind, which are very pizza related as it seems. And like I love pizza, and so much of my diet, especially when making the early Des Rocs records, was exclusively pizza every night because Joe's on 3rd Avenue was the only thing that would be open when I got home super, super late at night, like at 2 a.m. from working on music, right off the subway, 1 Avenue to Joe's, grab a slice, eat it on the walk home, and then hop into bed. And it's integral to my DNA in many ways.
As a dude who has worked in radio for 20 years and spent a big chunk of it not making a lot of money and realizing early on that like a $10 pizza can last you for like 3 days.
Yeah.
I totally understand exactly where you're coming from. And I think it was awesome that during the pandemic, like you started helping people out by giving away pizza.
Oh yeah. I mean, like, a lot of the restaurants needed help. So we drove donations to local pizza places, and then those pizzas were delivered to hospital workers. And we've done a couple of drives like that have been really successful. And, I'm super proud of that work.
It was pretty awesome just to kind of scroll through and see some of the stuff that you were able to do during the pandemic. Once this all wraps up, everything is done. Everything's back to normal and you're able to go out and play shows. I mean, what can we expect from Des Rocs? I know you mentioned the album and I know the shows are coming. What other stuff is on the horizon?
There's a lot, man. I mean, Des Rocs to me is just as visual of an artistic endeavor as it is musical. And I can't wait to start unveiling all the videos and visual elements that I've been creating over the last few months.
Well, I am excited to watch it all, to see it all happen. I'm excited to sort of follow the journey because I know this is sort of just the beginning of it all, and it's just going to go bigger and better from here. So looking forward to following you and seeing what you come up with. And I appreciate, man, you taking the time today to discuss everything that we've talked about. And again, I'll put it in my calendar now that 30 years from now, we'll have this whole discussion again.
Put in the G-Cal, man. Thank you. I appreciate it.
For sure. I will catch you soon, man. Thank you.
Of course. Take care.
I will see you.
Yeah.